Welcome to the Predictive Pulse Podcast. I'm Carlos Casas, CEO and Principal Analyst of Predictive Data Lab. We are your data science and media partner, and our team of experts are dedicated to providing strategic insights for data, research, and analysis. Our podcast explores the world of data and marketing analytics, helping you stay ahead of the curve. Join us on this journey to tap into tomorrow's insights today. Remember to subscribe so you don't miss any episodes as we embark on this data-driven adventure together. How do you see online advertising strategies evolving in the post-cookie era? And what steps can advertisers take today to future-proof their online advertising? In this episode, we'll discuss how businesses navigate the impact of cookie deprecation on online advertising strategies. Today, we're joined by Hector Thomas, Media Director at Predictive Data Lab. Hector brings a wealth of experience in navigating the dynamic landscape of digital advertising, and he's here to shed the light on how businesses and advertisers are adapting to the changing terrain without the reliance on cookies. All right, Hector. So we're talking about cookies. Obviously cookies and a cookieless world has a lot of implications both for the publisher as well as for advertisers and the brands. We're going to look and have our discussion really focused on the lens of the advertiser and the brands, even DMOs or any brand really, and how it's going to affect us. So what is your take on a cookieless world here?
Well, I guess the first thing I would say is it's going to be okay. I think people are worried about it being Armageddon to digital advertisers. And there are some nuances definitely to consider. There are some changes to be aware of. It will change things, but there are lots of tried and true methods that still will work. And there are new methods, emerging technologies and things that are going to make this possibly better than what we've experienced in the past.
Right.
Advertising has gone through so many iterations, but even still now, people don't always know if it's working or not. We still encounter these questions. And with all the tracking in the world, sometimes we're still unable to really dial it in of who we want to target with some of the tactics. So I think this is pushing things forward, but in a good way.
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing people need to do is to be flexible and balance their expectations of what they are going to be able to track and what they're going to be able to do with that.
Right. So for those that may not know, what exactly is a cookie? Let's start from the foundation, right? So what is a cookie? And then let's kind of walk through how cookies have been used, both historically, how we're using them still today, knowing that, we have somewhat of a deadline, right? The expectation is that Google will block on Chrome through their browser cookies or third-party cookies specifically at the end of the year, right? So that gives us roughly 10 months or so for everyone to really prepare or really think about this. If you haven't been thinking about it, it's now vital that you do. So let's start first with what exactly are cookies, how have they been used, and what are they for?
Right. So you brought up a good point when you said third-party cookies, because I think the first thing to understand is there are different types.
Right.
There's third-party cookies, which are basically data being collected from one domain by another domain. So it's crossing websites. It's following you around the internet. And then there's first-party cookies, which are still okay, not going anywhere,
right?
And where you're able to still collect valuable information for the user experience, for your website development, so many other things. First-party cookies aren't going away. So really, we're talking about third-party cookies going away. So those ones that are tracking you across the internet. And I think those do affect a couple of tactics that we've used extensively over the last, especially programmatically over the last 10, 15 years, which are behavioral targeting, retargeting. I think when it comes to cookies, I guess the third-party cookies, the best way to explain it is in real terms. So how do you experience these as an individual? And those would be when you go to a website and look at a pair of shoes, and then everywhere you go, those shoes are following you. That's the typical sort of retargeting that people are feel is a little bit invasive. There's also the behavioral targeting, which is looking at the websites you visit, the content you read, all of that, attaching it to you as a user,
Right.
and then following you to serve you ads. So that added some personalization, which was great. But what the problem is that it also were privacy concerns. So you might not want somebody to know you visited that website. You just might want to keep that information to yourself. It's not necessarily, even though that website may have said in their privacy policy somewhere that they're collecting this information, you didn't explicitly give them consent. And that's where the rub is. And that's where people were bothered, which is what prompted this whole process.
You think that that's what prompted this whole process? Is that really what you...
Well, that's where it started.
Okay.
I think it started with people feeling like an invasion of privacy, things along those lines. Then governments got involved. Then ruling bodies got involved, where it's like, this is probably not okay, right? And legislation gets involved. And when that happens, now you've got, a Mark Zuckerberg or, the Google leadership sitting in front of Congress having to answer a bunch of questions, feeling uncomfortable. And that's going to prompt some change. So I think that probably was a lot to do with it.
Right.
Maybe not the only thing, clearly, but definitely a lot to do with it. I think when it comes to the individual user and how it affects them, or an advertiser who's trying to reach people, we always had this situation where we didn't want to, we did frequency capping, for example. So we wouldn't want our ads to show up 30 times to the same person in a day, right? So they feel like, wow, get away from me, right? We wanted to be very sensitive about that. But the reason we needed to be sensitive about that is because we didn't want people to feel like they're being tracked on everywhere they go. And so that's what, a big reason for prompting the change, or at least all of the language that you hear, it's all about that. It's those privacy concerns.
Right.
And
So, I think from a consumer, I think that definitely is the story, right? Everyone is showing is privacy concern, right? However, I do think that from a more realistic basis, we're still, companies are still going to know a lot of that information that is, quote unquote, of the concern, right? So as an example, Google, and the reason why Google's able to do this is they control a lot of the traffic that is going online in terms of a browser, right? So the way you access the internet today, you go into a browser and you access the internet, right? So the number one browser across the world today is Chrome, and that's Google's browser, right? So everyone else has to compete for that. So Google now has the power, because they have so much of the web traffic, to really make a decision like this that will impact the publisher or the website, as well as the brands and the advertisers. But I do think that there's a little bit of misconception of that data going away, because ultimately what we could potentially see is just more reliance on Google, right? Because Google is still collecting all of that data.
Exactly.
Which I think is paramount for us to really understand, that this whole implication could be, in my personal opinion, I think is a strategy, a very smart strategy from Google to look good in front of a consumer, say, yes, we're protecting the privacy, but at the same time, cut out third-party data providers, and they become the sole provider of that data, really helping with identity resolution and things of that nature, and setting the standard of what that is, right? What those identifiers are. Because if you know that Google has been collecting identifiers,
absolutely,
for years, right? So tell us a little bit more about what exactly is that. So let's talk about identity resolution in relationship to cookies today.
So it's interesting, and we'll get into this too. You bring up a really good point, and something I was going to discuss, which is the whole walled gardens, and they're going to be fine.
Right.
In fact, I think that's going to probably lead to more expensive ads on places like Facebook.
Right.
Have traditionally been less expensive and easy to get into. I think now they have a lot more power, right? As you mentioned. So when you visit a website, Google adds to your visit a visitor ID. Right. So they tag you right away as a visitor. an ID for your session. So if you leave and come back, you'll have 2 session IDs, the same user ID. So everything is being recorded and tracked. Everything has, every action you take, it's all being recorded, right? It's not anything to be scared of. It makes for a better user experience.
Right.
It means when I get back to a website, it does load faster. There's lots of different things that my browser recording information is useful for me.
Right.
But that's Google is recording all sorts of identifiers with your visit, where you go, but they're holding all of that because it's their browser.
Correct. Yeah, it's their first party data.
Exactly.
Right. And one of the key identifiers that you have, especially on Chrome, is your email. Right. I mean, you log in via your Gmail, and it creates that link, and it works also cross device, right? Because Google prompts you quite a bit to log in through your desktop, your mobile, your tablet, whatever the case may be, through Chrome, right? So that identifier now has the ability to understand your behavior and your patterns cross device.
Right. And you see it everywhere, because now more and more apps, websites have this single sign-on. Right. And what is it doing? It's pulling your Google account directly, connecting it directly to that device. So that's your Google account. It's Google's account.
Right.
And so yes, they hold all of that information. So yes, absolutely. And you're going to see more and more of that. And it's so easy, right? The single sign-on, it's really simple. Now I have one password to worry about. It facilitates a connection to a website or an app or anything else lightning quick. So on the user side, and this is always the situation, right? The whole reason all this personalized advertising, the whole reason all of that exists is because users wanted a better experience. I mean, looking back to when we first started going to websites,
right,
and those blinking banners, and and
the click here now,
right, exactly, and ads that they didn't pertain to you at all. It bothered you,
right?
But now I could, from my phone, very quickly pull up, Domino's. It knows where I am. It'll pull the closest one. Within seconds, pretty much, I can order a pizza and have it delivered or go pick it up. And all of that's already known.
Right.
Because I have given permissions for my location and, all of these different things. It has made for a better web experience.
Right.
And I think, not all of that is going away, thankfully.
Right.
But yeah, it's interesting to see how much this has grown over the course of time.
Right. Yeah. And you bring up a great point, especially with the example of Domino's, right? So from a brand like Domino's, this has implications in various routes, right? And so you have to be able to work cohesively as a team to overcome this. The first one being your website, right? So here you're talking your development team. If you have personal software or your own particular software or things that you're using that may be third-party applications on your website, that's where you have to really take into consideration all of the provisions that Google has developed, right, for your specific use case. That way, the user on their end has a great consumer journey and is able to have a great experience on the site. That's one implication, right? And you have to have the development team understand that. The second one is now capturing the behavior or the information that you want from an advertiser's perspective.
Correct.
Right? Or from a tracking or analytics perspective. So being able to understand how many users are coming, who are they, what do they look like, et cetera.
Did they convert?
Did they convert? Correct. What drove them to conversion, right? What was the last touch attribution, things of that nature. And then the last one is, okay, how do I bring in new users to the site, right? New customers into the site using potentially or historically have used third-party cookies or that data, right? So tell us, we've talked a little bit about the publisher and highlighted a little bit. On the second point, on the analytics, what do you feel like is going to happen or potentially is happening now, or we can do to prepare?
It's a great question, and I think the mind shift change that needs to happen is not so dialed into the individual journey or individual targeting or any of that. It's really about grouping is really where things, when I look at the trends, when I look at, the Google's privacy sandbox, and we can get into all of that, but the where things are going, Google's privacy sandbox is basically its iteration of this cookie-less world, right? And how you can still have a good user experience as a user. Advertisers still have an opportunity to advertise. In other words, Google still gets to make money.
Right.
All of those things. But where things are headed is really in looking at groupings. And, for us, that's actually great because that's how we, want to target. We want to target personas and we want to target groups of individuals. So they're still individuals, but in a group, right? Where we can say, okay, we want this aspect and that aspect and the other aspect. To me, I think that's actually a good thing because now you're reaching more people that are aligned with what you want to, the message you want to convey. So I think that's when I look at analytics, and you're seeing this more and more with GA4, Google Analytics, Universal Analytics, what we used for over a decade, it's now gone. Now you have GA4. It's confusing. It's frustrating. You can't find what you're looking for.
Right.
And when you do, data seems to be missing and all of that. And what Google's trying to do is say, you need to look at this, you need to step back a little bit and look at this from a little bit more of a cohort perspective. And, step back and look at this as groupings. And I think when you look at where all the technology is advancing, it is more along the lines of looking at distinct groups.
Interesting. Yeah, that's interesting. How does the grouping, in your opinion, fit with the identity resolution?
It's a good question. So what they're doing is, if let's just say I go to a website and I'm looking for a new pair of runners, right? Tennis shoes. I might be looking at a specific type. Well, in the past, what would happen is I would, then leave, go somewhere else, and then see that exact shoe, even the color, everything now in front of me.
Right. And that's powered by third-party cookies.
That's powered by third-party cookies. And so what's happening now is you're still going to be able to get your shoes in front of that person. But what's happening now is you're going to have to do that in a little bit broader sense. So you can get maybe that type, it's a men's runner, it's this particular style. Collect all of the people who are looking at those types of shoes into a group. And then now you can then reach out to people that a publisher is making available with, say, content around what's the best running shoe, right? And then you now can serve your ad in front of that person. So it's very similar to what we've experienced in the past. The difference is some of that specificity for the individual is now going to be gone. Right. And now what you're going to do is you're just reaching a group of people. So you don't know it's that individual anymore. You just know that the individuals that visited your site, you're going to be able to reach out to them, but just in a group instead of one at a time. Right.
So that's where, so talking about analytics, but now let's shift a little bit towards the media buying, right? So, because that's our part of our bread and butter. So, that is where I think that has to happen a shift in our mindset, right?
Correct.
Because we're so used to, when we plan media or when we plan media buy specifically, we might be very specific on the behavior and the targeting we want to achieve and obtain with that one-to-one, right? So that we can provide the best possible targeting for our clients. So now that might not be able to occur, right? That one-to-one, what are some of the solutions that we can tap into?
It's a fantastic question. And I think it's why I'm excited about this more than dreading it.
Right.
Because there are some tried and true methods. So you can still target users based on their location. So where they live, really good indicator of who they are. I have a friend of mine, the neighborhood they live in, I can already tell you just by driving through that neighborhood that most of these kids play t-ball or baseball or something along those lines. Right. They all drive an SUV. Like it's, where somebody lives is a really good indicator of the things that they're interested in. So, and that's not going away. You can still target based on their location of where they live and also where they go.
Right.
So somebody who visits museums and, art shows, that they're interested in culture, you can still target people based on that.
Right.
So there's lots of, location-based targeting that's still available. Then there's contextual targeting. So reaching people based on what they're reading. Right. But that also includes what they're watching. So if somebody's watching videos on a topic, you're not identifying them as an individual, you're identifying the content. Right. And you can still target that content all day long. So you're reaching the right person. So all these methods are ones we use and have had great success with those types of targeting. Those aren't going away. Right. And so I think that it just means we need to focus more on some of those things than on the behavioral, what websites they visited, which hasn't always been a great indicator of what they're interested in. Because people are diverse. They might look up something for a brief amount of time, but then they leave. Right. So,
and you touch on a great point there, Hector, because that's one of the key driving forces behind what led to the development of our AI, right, Ava. I mean, so when we were buying, literally spending millions of dollars in media buys, and you're applying a behavioral segment, if you don't really understand the methodology on how that segment was created, right? And most buyers don't, right? They just look at the price. It looks good. Maybe I heard it somewhere, or I went to a conference and I saw their logo somewhere, so I trust them. So I'll buy it, and the client doesn't really know if that is any good. Right. So that brings out a great point that, yes, we've been great at doing that one-to-one, but sometimes we're targeting a computer, right? Or we're targeting something that is not completely a user. So being able to develop a system, and our system was designed to look at the household, right? Look at the household first. Forget cookie behavior, cookie data. Look at the household, look at the neighborhood, group people by personas based on where they live, based on how they behave with outside of the internet, right?
Right, exactly.
And therefore get to know them as personas. And when we activate a campaign, we're activating it using other identifiers, right? Like location, the bit rate from the ad call, things like that, to be able to say, okay, that household fits within our persona, right? So when cookies are going away, this could actually be a good thing, right? From a basis of better data, better systems to utilize when we're using targeting.
Yeah, I would agree. I think, one of the considerations is it might get more expensive. That's kind of what I'm expecting to happen. So one of those is, like I mentioned, the location or the content, but also having to rely on these walled gardens, these Facebooks and Google, Amazon,
Instagram,
that have
TikTok,
that have a ton of first party data. That's honestly the value of the company. And so, that's where you're going to have to buy. And it's not bad because it is rich and you can target the personas and the people you're trying to reach. I think there's going to be a reliance on that. And then, keyword intent. So search. YouTube is also similar in that respect, that people are typing in something very specific that they want to find. Well, that keyword shows the intent you're looking for, and you don't have to identify the individual, right? So paid search, that's not going anywhere. Surprisingly, it's Google's number one product, right?
Oh, yeah.
So that's not going anywhere. This actually plays right into that.
Exactly.
And so again, I think that unfortunately for advertisers, those costs are not going down anytime soon.
Right.
But it is a great way to target because the user is stating their intent by what they've typed in. Like they're telling you they're interested in this, and it is a great way to target. It will continue to be a great way to target. So I think the other part of it is for advertisers to have their clients rely on their first party data.
Right.
And that's something that I think is one of the best results or, parts of this cookieless world is that there's going to be a reliance more on first party data. So either you're going to be buying somebody else's or you're developing your own, or in some cases doing a little bit of both.
Right.
But for advertisers, the these companies that are collecting people's addresses when they buy something or they ship something, they're collecting, all this valuable information, then start to leverage that, start to use that. By doing that, you can find lookalikes. You can find people who match your best customers and grow your business that way. That's always been a great way to do it. It just hasn't been a big focus. Now it's coming into focus, and that's why I'm excited. Obviously, that's something that we have focused our business around as well. And yeah, I think that the results for that are going to be better.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. And it's we find ourselves in an intersection, right? That's happening in an effort to really be able to help facilitate that. And so, if you're a brand or a small brand or even a medium-sized brand, you might not have been working on precisely that, capturing first-party data, cleaning it, making sure that it's accurate. And not just that, but going through the process of the identity resolution, right? So making sure that you have some form of identifier, et cetera, for that particular buyer, right? Your customers. So that in itself is something that I think is really important, especially for brands that historically speaking have never captured that data, right? You're looking at things like DMOs, CVBs, other brands, right? That don't have that, retailers that don't have that. And so that I think it's a crucial step for future success, is to be able to focus some time, some funds to bring that to the forefront and really take advantage of the fact that is something that can really take their advertising, their marketing, their intelligence to the next level.
Right. No, I completely agree. And I think that there are some that have collected this and not known what to do with it.
Yeah.
Never done anything with it. It's just sitting there. It's a treasure that's just sitting there.
Right.
And I think between that and those who now start to focus on that, there's going to be a need for expertise. I think that's the challenge with the first party data that companies will collect. That is a barrier, but it's an achievable obstacle to overcome. And I think that's where you do need expertise. I mean, obviously for us, that's where we live, right? And it's something that we can help with. But yeah, there's going to be some people who will develop an entire team now that they didn't have before. The companies that can afford to do so, they should. But for those that, that's not a focus, it really is about somehow, some way finding that expertise to then leverage this rich data.
And you bring out a great point, right? Those big organizations or big brands that can afford it are doing it. They're already doing it. They have to. They see that as a necessity. So for the smaller brand that isn't doing it right now, it is vital for them to realize we need to pay attention to this, right? They might not be able to afford a full team, but they do need to think about this and approach this subject, not be scared of it, right? Thinking that it's only something for the big brands. There's companies like ours that are here to help them to be able to overcome that issue.
Exactly. And I think, that's going to be the future because so we talked about some of the tried and true methods, right? The location-based, the search-based, content-based, things like that. But down the line, things that are already existing, but really have been existing for big brands. I mean, we're talking like, your Procter & Gamble and your bigger brands like that, but has been this sort of clean room technology, which is where a publisher's first-party data and a company's first-party data meet. They don't see each other, right? There's a wall there, but the insights from both combine. It's like, I guess the best way to explain it would be is if you had two chefs, right? They each bring their own ingredients. They don't see each other's ingredients, but together they make this cake. The cake is the insights, right? And then that result becomes very useful to both, right? And so, but what that's going to rely on is the company's first party data. And without them being able to bring that, it's not going to be possible. Again, cohort development, same thing. There's another technology called collaborative cohorts. And what this is doing, this is again, what we're going to be seeing in the near future. It's about, you can have, like we do, create cohorts based on first party data. But the idea here is then again, collaborative, right? So you're going to take your first party data, another's first party data, and create these cohorts where now I can want to advertise to a specific group of people. this other company has that same cohort, that same group
Right.
of people. We've developed that together, and now it's mutually beneficial.
Right.
They're selling ad space. We're getting the ads in front of people. It's the right people, and the results follow.
Yeah. Awesome. So we're going to talk about, you bring out two great points, and I want to break them down one by one first. So the first one, just so we all understand what we mean by first party data, right? So the goal here is to really understand your customer ultimately, right? People that have either visited your destination or purchased your product, right? Is to understand them as a grouping, as you mentioned, as a persona, not necessarily a one-to-one relationship. That is ultimately step one, right? Now, if you don't know how to do that, what are some of the steps you can take to achieve that?
Oh, that's a great question. And you're probably better at answering this than I am, but it really is. Wow, that's a good one. I think there are several steps, it's a good question.
Just reach out to us, Hector.
Yeah, I think that's it. I think that's it. I think, there's, let's see, how would I answer that in a way that makes sense? Yeah, I think that's I got to think about that one for a second.
Yeah. Because ultimately it requires certain levels of disciplines, right? Coming together, and smaller to medium-sized brands are going to be in a state where they might not be able to acquire that. So that in itself is the issue, the number one issue, right? But we'll talk a little bit about what we're doing with some of our clients is helping them collect that data first, whether it's through the data they already have, right, and the systems they already have, their current tech stack, to be able to help bring that into a location that can be basically analyzed, right? So that first step is just really being able to bring that in, cleaning it, making sure that it is first and foremost structured correctly,
right,
and also accurate, right? And that's kind of step one. From there, we then essentially put all of the data we have that is part of our world environment,
right,
to be able to bring those insights to life based or powered by their first party data, right?
And so, yeah, when you say that, I mean, it really is collecting from all sorts of places. It's not just, when you think first party data, a lot of times people would be thinking, oh, okay, well, my customer information. Okay, maybe. But this also can come from your social media feeds, from there's so many different sources, your Google Analytics, there's so many different places where you can draw information from.
Yeah. And
it really is about collecting all of those into one place. Yeah. Cleaning that up where, the fields all match, where, all these different sort of columns all line up. And that takes some work, it takes some processing. But then from doing that, now you can develop a real clear picture about who these people are.
Right.
And, who you should target, who you shouldn't, who you should put more dollars towards, where you might do really well, but have a small footprint that you could grow.
Right.
And I think that's where this needs to go.
Right.
And it really is about, again, I think, number one, collecting all of that information from the various sources, understanding that, for everything from an email address to, the physical address to purchase history to your social media followers, your, et cetera. And then getting all of these pieces together, then being able to process that information. And that's, again, where I was saying earlier, where the challenge really lies.
Right.
It's, how do you get there?
Right.
And I think for bigger companies, they can employ people who are data scientists and can, do this. And for others, they're going to need to reach out to experts who can process this information for them, but then provide them something useful in return, right? What can I do with this information? And really it is about then getting these groupings, clusters, cohorts, personas, call them what you want. They all have a role, but then being able to, now knowing this group that we want to target and knowing that these tactics and channels there are available, then reach out to those.
Right.
And that's where I think it's going to be, without a doubt, much better results for advertisers. It is a challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. Now you brought out a great point, or a second great point, which is the media plan. So now you have these insights. Now you have these personas built, and now you want to activate, right? So do you think that as the cookie-less world impacts us more and more, there will be a shift to, in terms of media dollars, right, to things like more social, more search, right, more of those world environments that have that first-party data that ideally with your first-party data now can take advantage of that?
Absolutely. And I think that this is where, again, I'm excited about it because there are so many different tactics available. It's like tools in the toolbox. You know, when you have a project and you need a Phillips screwdriver, you know, and you're trying to use a slotted screwdriver, it's not going to work as well.
Right.
You might be able to make it work, but when you have that exact right tool to get the job done, it's effortless almost.
Right.
And I think, you know, all these tactics are tools that could be used based on this information.
Right.
So again, it comes back to targeting people where they are, where they go, what they're reading, what they're watching, what they're searching,
Right.
you know, and all of these are still available to us.
Right.
But who are those people, right? And that's where the difference, because you can do all of these tactics,
Right.
but if you don't know who those people are,
Right.
Or if you're relying on third-party cookies to reach these people,
Right.
that's where it falls off.
Right.
But once you have a really good understanding for who these people are, a very clear picture for, you know, let's just say your traditional family with the, you know, 2.5 kids and an SUV versus your, you know, just married couple that wants to go explore. I mean, these are very different people.
Right.
They could both be your customers,
Right.
right? So understanding these specific groups
Right.
allows you to reach quite a few individuals, more than you might have done from this sort of individualized targeting,
Right.
or at least more accurately.
Right.
And then activate each one of these channels towards that group to achieve your results. And it works.
Yeah. One of the main concerns that a lot of people think is that the data that we have, or the insights that we have utilized in the past using cookies, are going to go away, right? So for example, we have a user that earns a certain amount of income, the number of children in the household, type of vehicle they drive, credit score, things of that nature. Those are things that, historically speaking, we've used from a targeting perspective.
Right.
So will that go away? And the short answer is yes and no. Right. Yes, from a third-party cookie basis, right? We won't be able to have that identity one-to-one to say that individual earns this income, earns this, that. However, what we're approaching is we have access to data that isn't going away, right? Is not cookie dependent. Things that are more accurate, things that are cross-referenced at the household level rather than at a cookie level. And what we end up with is the same insights, right? So we have information or intelligence on the type of household, the income levels, the type of vehicle they own, the type of phone they have, the expenditure habits, things of that nature. So all those insights we still have.
Right. No, it's a great point, and I think you brought it up, the word accurate, because that information is far more accurate
right.
than what the third-party cookies collected. You can actually go, or I think you still can, to Blue Kai. And Blue Kai is one of those third-party aggregators of data, and look at your own segment.
Right.
And I've done this.
Right.
And it has me as both a middle-aged man and an elderly woman, and I mean, all over the place.
Right.
You know, has me as low income. It has me as the top 1%. I'm thankfully neither, but you know, it's right there in between, but it has me all over the place.
Right.
And seeing that was fascinating to me,
right.
of how many things it got wrong. There were a lot of things right. And so that's why it still does work.
Right.
But that behavioral targeting, that third-party cookie targeting, required a lot of reach to get the people that were actually the right fit.
Right.
Because of that, because it's hit or miss.
Right.
And I think that when you look at things like census data, right, which is available, and far more dialed in.
Right.
All of these things. I mean, everything from vehicle registrations to, there's so many different sources out there.
Right.
I think the difficulty is collecting all those resources.
Right.
Cleaning that information.
Right.
Matching that information to user information. But when you can do that,
right,
now you have a lot of power.
Right.
And now when you go to reach these people, you're going to have a very effective campaign because you do know who these people are.
Right. Yeah. And that's exactly our mission, right? I mean, in terms of really helping a brand or a DMO understand who is their customer or visitor, right? So that's step one. Then step two is providing all the insights that we want to know about that customer, right? And using data that is, again, cookie less, not dependent on cookies, and using data that is more tried and true, really, to be able to provide those insights about income levels and ethnicity and education and, behaviors and things of that nature, expenditures. So that way, now you have a strong first-party data set that you can then now match with other strong data sets, like you described from Facebook and Google and other ones, which I think that's really the what we think is the best solution for a cookie-less world. And what I think is going to happen as this deadline hits and Google actually does it, we will see that advertisers or brands will first assess, well, how is this really impacting me? And once they start to see the waste, right? I'm spending X amount of money and it's not reaching the right group that I want, or I'm not getting the results I used to. That's when that mind shift will likely occur to say, I need to focus on my first party data.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly. No, it's really true, because that reliance that advertisers have had in the past on other people's data to reach their target audience was never a great idea. Right? It was honestly never a great idea if you had the ability to reach something that you now own. Like that first party data, you get to own that.
Right.
And now leverage it. You're not so reliant on some other source to reach these people. Now you know what you need, and now you just have to tap into these audiences on the publishers where they frequent.
Right. And I think that's just to wrap it all together, right? So as we put together media plans, we execute media campaigns, the goal will be to utilize that first party data from the publisher side, right? So whether that's Facebook or Meta now or TikTok, whatever the case may be, utilize different identifiers, right? Or different, obviously you'll still have the data set or that grouping from that first party data. From a programmatic basis, looking at different identifiers, right? That help you understand that individual that you're reaching is part of your correct grouping, whether that's the ad call or the bit rate, or whether that is the location.
Exactly.
Right. Really to understand those unique identifiers that help you to make sure that you're still reaching the right audience.
That's exactly right. And you think about, specific tactics like connected TV, OTT, like, you are now able to target somebody based on their location and based on what they're consuming. There's so many different components now you can start tweaking to make sure that your video, your ad, whatever, is in front of the right person. And that's where this just becomes so powerful, and where you can do this programmatically because you can plug in the location you're trying to target. You can plug in, these different factors based on the data you now know that you've collected, that you have, based on this audience or that audience,
right? Then
reach them in an automated bidding fashion. So that's not going away either. And I think that's an important thing to understand, is that, for programmatic, it's a buzzword. It's been a way to, scale your marketing campaign rather than reaching out to individual publishers and all that had to happen in the past.
Right.
It's a great way to buy ads, place ads, serve ads, a great way to get results back, all of that. And the big concern is if cookies go away, how is that affected? Well, we've kind of discussed over this last hour or so, like how that's still available, still very available.
Right.
And if you bring the right data to the table,
right,
how effective it can be.
Right. Right. Now, you say it's still available, but we're still talking different identifiers.
Correct.
Right.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. So, there's certain things that are not going to be available. Be real clear about that. And things like, I think the biggest one that is a challenge and one that has been very effective, aside from the behavioral targeting, is retargeting.
Yeah. Where
retargeting has been a very effective way of reaching somebody right? But on another site. But again, this isn't necessarily completely going away. It's just going to take a different form. And this is where, with this sort of retargeting grouping, where you're retargeting a group rather than a specific individual. But I think, to take it all away from what we've discussed, having the flexibility, to recognize that some metrics are going to look a little different, some targeting is going to look a little different, is critical. It's super important to level set expectations across the board, so company wide, right, from the CEO down to the marketing coordinator. All need to reset their expectations about what they're able to do. Honestly, this shift, because it's so well known and so well publicized, Google, right?
Right.
Doing their due diligence there. That's actually going to help that conversation.
Yeah. Where
you can tell somebody, hey, your expectations need to shift. And if you have something positive to add to that, that's great, because the overall mindset is, from an advertiser standpoint anyway, this is a big negative, right? But if you can reset those expectations, and the methodology, those identifiers, and that understanding, it's going to be a better world.
Yeah.
For the advertiser.
Awesome.